Hello, everyone, and welcome to the workshop portion of today's presentation. My name is Jonathan Webster. I'm Managing Director of One Small Step, and I'm joined today by Cole Johnston. Cole, would you quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Cole. I'm a dialogue educator and facilitator, and I'm the manager of student programs here at One Small Step.
Today, we hope to use this session to introduce you to our Learn, Practice, Model methodology and share some tools to enhance communication across difference inside and outside of the workplace. So today's agenda, what we plan to cover, we'll do an introduction to StoryCorps in One Small Step, our program. We'll describe our approach to bridging work. We're going to do an exercise, actually a couple of exercises with you to practice some of the crucial skills that are necessary to making connections across difference. And then we'll have, as Sean said, a separate Q&A session. So before we get started here, we wanted to hear from you. What do you hope to get out of today's session? We'll reflect on fears and challenges a little bit later, but for now, what hopes do you have around bridging difference? What about this kind of work makes you hopeful? Please throw your answers in the chat. Finding common ground to get stuff done. Yes, I think there is a lot of frustration with the lack of action in all aspects of our communities where we can't get to common ground, we can't see a path forward. Approaches that work, right? There's a lot of advice out there, but what actually does science suggest is going to be effective? Unusual allies together. I think that's a great idea. Lots of people have shared values they wouldn't necessarily reflect on, but that could be the core of a foundation that would allow them to realize some shared goals. These are really great. I very much hope that we will address some of these hopes and please keep them rolling in. But I think right now we're going to now that we've covered some of the foundations, we're going to move into a little bit of an overview of that learn, practice, model approach. So One Small Steps work is steeped in the tradition of our parent organization, StoryCorps. For those that aren't familiar, StoryCorps aims to record, preserve, and share the stories of Americans from all backgrounds and beliefs. Its mission statement, as you see, is to help us believe in each other by illuminating the humanity and possibility in all of us, one story at a time. StoryCorps was founded in 2003 by radio producer Dave Isay, and in that time has created the single largest archive of human voices anywhere on the planet. And those stories are regularly featured on NPR's Morning Edition and through other channels. Our research partner, More in Common, which I strongly suggest everybody take a look at, has coined this term, the exhausted majority, to refer to the 87% of Americans who are tired of division and eager for change. And this is the opportunity that we see at One Small Step. This group, the exhausted majority, is not defined by a single race, age, or region. It's a broad and cross-cutting group, including people from different backgrounds, political beliefs, education levels, and income brackets. Compared to the 13% of Americans in the political wings identified by More in Common's research, this vast majority of Americans is more open to compromise, is more curious, is more inclined to demonstrate respect in conversation even when they disagree with others, and sees listening and finding common ground as essential to progress. Now, One Small Step is StoryCorps' attempt to use the power of personal narrative to reduce polarization in the United States by pairing people with different beliefs for one-on-one conversations and capturing those moments to elevate those participants as role models in their communities and for the nation. But we don't wait for people to come and share their stories with us because at OSS, our work is proactive. We don't want polarization to escalate. We don't want to continue on this trend. So now, proactively, we build the conditions for connection early and often. It's also experiential, our approach. We don't just teach communication theory, we immerse people in it, and we're going to be doing a little bit of that today. And finally, it's a tailored approach. So we're listening carefully to the needs of the communities we serve, and we're co-creating opportunities that are culturally and contextually relevant. Because as you know, the concerns, the issues that are top of mind in any given community are always unique to that community. So it needs to be tailored. And so here is what is really at the heart of what we do. We help people learn the underlying tools that make connection possible. We help people practice those skills with intention, and we use these experiences to model what meaningful conversation looks like for broader audiences. So now that we've covered the big picture, we're going to dive a little bit into each component. And first, we're going to give you a taste of the power of modeling these conversations.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. There are so many peer organizations who are doing incredible work in the bridging space, and everybody kind of has their own niche and specialty. And our specialty here at One Small Step is our ability to help people believe that connection across difference is possible by showing them. So we use our more than 20 years of experience uplifting the power of the human voice to create high quality produced pieces that can be easily distributed at scale. And when we amplify these conversations, whether it's through audio stories, through campus radio, social media, or even hallway posters, it does shift the culture. It lets people know that these conversations are both possible and that they matter. And our research shows that our best testing content convinces more than 60% of listeners that it is possible to have a meaningful conversation with somebody who holds different beliefs and perspectives. And that's really the first step, right? Is thinking that these conversations is possible is necessary to even having the conversation in the first place. So now we're going to listen to a real One Small Step conversation to give you a taste of what this modeling looks and sounds like. As you listen, notice what's happening emotionally and relationally, not what's just being said. And that can be emotionally and relationally for the participants you're hearing, but also maybe just observe a little bit how you're resonating and how it makes you feel.
Let me ask you this. When you read my bio, what did you think? And please be as honest as you feel comfortable because nothing would bother me.
So the first part, my mind kicked into stereotype. She's probably dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. End of story. Second part was intriguing because you said something along the lines of an open mind. I thought, well, this will be interesting.
When I read your bio, I just thought you were a white man. I thought I was going to come in here and just
I don't even know what it was. I don't even remember what it was.
And that's what's so interesting to me is that I'm just like,
Stereotype.
that's exactly right. So I have to admit it, and I appreciate you receiving that and allowing me to admit my stereotype, because when you walked in the door and you stood up and introduced myself, I was like, oops. I don't feel threatened. I hope you don't feel threatened. Once we leave this conversation, I believe we'll have other conversations with others, may revisit, maybe your wife and my husband and four of us can get together and continue a conversation. But my point is that, what are we afraid of?
I really love that clip of David and Cassandra. There's so much laughter happening there, which I think is like one of the most humanizing things that happen in the StoryCorps interviews I've facilitated. And before I move on, that last line in the clip that Cassandra shares is really powerful. She asked, "What are we afraid of?" And as Jonathan mentioned in the beginning, it's obviously a challenging and anxiety-inducing time to be a communications professional and also just a human being. So, since we asked about your hopes earlier, we also want to take a moment to reflect on fears that might be holding us back. So if you could just share in the chat, personally or professionally, what fears do you have around conversations across difference? Yeah, I'm seeing too busy managing reactions to actually have an honest and thoughtful conversation. Absolutely. Like struggle for authenticity is something I hear often. Being misunderstood not feeling like there's an ability to effectively communicate what we're trying to share. Yeah, feelings of acceptance, discomfort, right? Being able to tolerate discomfort or distress is something that's really challenging. Yeah, alienation, emotions, misunderstanding. I'm seeing these themes come across really, really, really strongly. Um, yeah, attacked, degraded. So these are not, unfortunately, surprising responses to hear. And yeah, if you're still writing your response to the prompt, please feel free to drop that in the chat. But it's something that when I started out my journey myself, I was really, really concerned about. And throughout my time doing this work professionally, I've come to realize that a lot of these problems originate not in the high level aspect of our actual opinions, but they really come down to our ability to connect with others, right? Their social skills, relational skills, listening skills. And so, beyond establishing the importance of modeling as a key to generating buy-in to have these conversations, once people know the conversation is possible, we want to give them the opportunity to take the next step and practice. And this comes with the risk that you're all identifying with these fears. So in this next section, we're going to talk about a few elements from our experiential opportunities that minimize risk and maximize participants' meaningful experience in these types of conversations. And Jonathan is going to get us started on that.
Okay, so as Cole said, this next part of our theory is all about practice. OSS is different from many of our peer organizations because it doesn't stop at content delivery. We embed this work in people's daily lives. So whether that's through workplace training, community partnerships, or campus courses, we are creating recurring opportunities for connection and practicing these skills. To give you an idea of the firsthand impact of this kind of experiential opportunity to practice meaningful conversation, we're going to hear from Torsky and Caitlin as they reflect on their experience together with their facilitator, Justin.
How comfortable was it to talk about differences around faith and religion? And was there something that your partner said or did that made you feel more comfortable?
Caitlin's questions really made me think a little bit, not so much, oh, you practiced as Jehovah's Witness when you was a kid? Tell me about that. Like, she felt comfortable, and I think we created a culture in that space where she did deep dive on me, and I was like, ooh, hold on. how am I supposed to respond to this one? But yeah, I just kind of, rose to and I agree, Caitlin, like as you have the conversation, it's that tiptoeing around and, there's some things and you're like, oh, do I go there?
Yeah, it's almost weird to be in a conversation where you've been explicitly given permission to talk about these things that you're normally not supposed to talk about.
Right. Right.
So as you heard in that clip, the one small step conversation space carries a kind of explicit permission to ask questions that go deeper and ask questions that really matter. And you might be wondering, how is that possible for two strangers to achieve? And how could this translate to a workplace? Well, there are two key ingredients we use to make this possible. First and foremost, we want to move beyond the idea that conversations can be safe and instead cultivate conversations that are brave. So this means that everyone involved feels safe in a conversation, but not necessarily comfortable. We create this balance through our ground rules, and Cole will tell us a little bit more about those.
Absolutely. So ground rules are kind of like the bedrock of having a meaningful, constructive conversation, even if conflict is present. And effective ground rules do a few key things. So they kind of neutralize or balance power dynamics that might be present in a given conversation. They really encourage the use of personal narrative and storytelling. So moving away from the idea that there's an objective truth and you're trying to prove what's true, and instead thinking like, we're going to take all the perspectives in the room and build a kind of shared truth together. And then lastly, they kind of act as a conversation constitution. And what I mean by that is it's a set of principles that transcends any authority in the room, right? They're kind of these like sacred agreements that we're all sharing as a group, all participants. And they can be invoked by anybody if the group starts to get off track. And so that kind of democratizes the conversation, right? It makes everyone who's participating invested in the outcome, and it moves it away from just one person who's the facilitator. And then lastly, it's establishing a shared purpose, right? Like human beings work best together when we know that we're headed toward a similar goal. And so that's why these ground rules are so essential as a starting point in building these more collaborative cultures. If you'd like to know more about possible ground rules or strategies for implementing them in your workplace, meeting spaces, that kind of thing, Jonathan is going to share a link to Cornell's Center for Dialogue and Pluralism resources in the chat. I'm a huge fan of Cornell's Center for Dialogue and Pluralism. In my opinion, they're the most brilliant minds addressing these questions in higher education today. So definitely give those a look if you're looking for example agreements or just strategies for how they can be implemented in these types of settings. The second key ingredient here is our conversation roadmap. So this is the document that participants actually have in front of them while they are participating in a one small step conversation. The roadmap is highly structured, and the way it's structured reinforces the principles laid out in those ground rules, and it also provides a sense of certainty to the participants. So they have an idea of where the conversation might go and what kinds of questions might come up for them. And that helps reduce that catastrophizing or any kind of, anxiety that might come up from a sense of uncertainty. Each roadmap intentionally moves participants through 4 phases, and these phases are structured to ease people into vulnerability and asking curious questions rather than making declarative statements. So the first phase is establishing shared intentions. This often looks like the very first question in a one small step conversation being, why did you want to do this conversation? And participants, even if they have really different perspectives, often find that they have a shared value or intention for joining. Secondly, we have them develop some interpersonal understanding and context. And this is kind of that deep dive that Torsky and Caitlin were talking about. So each participant takes, sometimes up to 5 minutes really to talk all about their backgrounds. They talk about their hometowns. They talk about their immediate family growing up and like who was present in their home. They talk about their high school experience. They talk about their class background. They talk about their activities, like what they like to do. It's really kind of a moment for like anything that somebody who's trying to connect with you needs to know. And we establish that before any conflicting perspectives start to come into play. In the third phase, we have participants explore expectations and assumptions. Facilitators like to call this the choose your own adventure section. So the participants are really asking questions. We have a few different kind of boxes of topics that they can choose from, or they can come up with their own questions. Anything that sparks genuine curiosity is the goal here, to explore and understand whatever differences might be present. And then the last phase is to reflect on the shared experience and express any gratitude. This is a really simple wrap-up question. And this typically looks like, is there something you learned about me today that surprised you? Or what's one thing you're taking away from today's conversation? So those are our 2 key ingredients. Keep in mind, these tools aren't just for the explicitly political, right? They are adaptable for team retreats, for board development, even donor engagement conversations, anywhere where you're trying to structure connection rather intentionally. We can design that structure and the culture of our workplaces to encourage meaningful connection. But there's one more essential component and skill, and this is my favorite as the manager of student programs. I'm a huge nerd about it, and that is skill building, right? We need certain skills to practice when you're in these spaces. So we're now going to step into this learn portion of our approach. And because of our limited time today, we're only going to cover 2 foundational skills to enhance human connection and understanding. Just keep in mind that these skills are embedded in much larger strategies and frameworks for effective communication. This is really only the beginning of a journey. If you're already familiar with some of the concepts that we're going to discuss today, The good news is that these are perennial. So I've been practicing these skills for over a decade, and man, I still benefit from continuing to practice them, right? Like the journey is never over when it comes to some of these more foundational ideas. The first skill we're going to practice is active listening. And active listening is about listening to understand rather than to respond. So in our everyday conversations, we might find ourselves focusing on what we're going to say in response while another person is speaking. It's a super normal aspect of our culture, but we want to work against that cultural norm by putting our full attention on the words and body language of the person who's speaking to us. And then we also want to suspend judgment in order to put ourselves in the speaker's shoes. So, like critical listening and empathetic listening, in my view, are actually opposites. They're mutually exclusive. So, if we're thinking critically, it's very hard to think empathetically. So, we want to set the critical voice aside to really be able to make room to put ourselves in the speaker's shoes. If you're a mindfulness geek like me, I also like to say this is choosing to radically accept the speaker as they are, right? Like you're accepting their perspective, you're accepting the reality of who they are, rather than thinking about how they should be. So it's moving our attention. In the workplace, this skill is essential anywhere we're communicating. So it helps us understand and build relationships with managers, direct reports, stakeholders, donors. And then beyond that, at a larger scale, it enhances our problem solving and ideational processes. The second skill we're going to practice today is affirmation. And affirmation is how we show somebody that we heard what they were trying to share with us and that we value them connecting with us, right? That we heard them and that their sharing matters, even if you don't agree. It establishes a shared sense of humanity before potentially conflicting perspectives come into play. So we always want to affirm what someone has shared before we introduce any conflict into the conversation. It makes them feel seen and understood and allows them to kind of be more open to receiving whatever this conflicting perspective might be. I think this is the most underrated skill out there, by the way. It in workplace not only strengthens relationships and a sense of belonging, but it also proactively addresses any misunderstandings that might be happening in the course of your communication, because it gives the person who you're reflecting back to an opportunity to clarify anything they shared that didn't successfully get across. So today we're going to practice first listening and then affirming. So we're going to listen to two short clips from real One Small Step conversations. And then after each one, we're going to take a moment to reflect and type in the Zoom chat a sentence or two that affirms what you heard. So when you write this affirmation, I'm going to ask that you speak directly to the person in the clip and try to reflect the values or the emotions that you heard. You don't have to agree with what is said, right? And I think this is really essential. We do affirm in this culture, but it's usually by stating things we agree with. Sometimes there's nothing we agree with in what gets said, right? And that's okay. So we're going to try affirming emotions in the first clip and then values in the second. So for this first clip, emotions, Jonathan is going to share a definition of what this looks like in the chat. So essentially, you're listening for what emotions were expressed in the sharing and in reference to who or what, and how would you describe the speaker's emotions? So it's both emotions at play within the story and then emotions that are happening as the speaker tells it. Once we're done listening, once again, we're going to pause. Everyone will type out a sentence, affirmation for what they heard, and then I'll give some live feedback and we'll do one more practice round. And affirmations often, if you look to the right of this slide, start with things like, it sounds like, I heard you say, I really appreciated when you, right? So that's how the sentence might start. Okay, ready or not, here we come. We're going to jump in and listen to these two women talk a little bit about their experience with family holidays in this climate.
At Christmas time, we had a lot of family here and it got very heated. And somebody in the middle of it said, you know what, I don't agree with you, but I love you because you're my family. And let's just stop there for a minute. And that really helped.
A year ago, when my brother and sister-in-law were here, I just felt like I had been shot in the chest with a machine gun for like a solid hour. And then when they were leaving, I just said, I'm afraid our country's going to have a civil war, and I'm afraid that we're going to be fighting on opposite sides. And that makes me so, so sad. And then after that, we've never talked about that issue again, or politics. We just avoid
Wow.
things.
Wow. That's tough. Because that's a big statement. And I think I felt that too, is like, I've not been with that same group of people since Christmas either. So I'm listening to you thinking, yeah, are we going to bring that back up?
I don't want to be a chicken, but on the other hand, I don't want to just have a superficial relationship with parts of my family, which
Right.
I'm afraid I kind of do now.
Right. I want to have better relationships, but how do we bridge that gap, right?
All right, we just heard from Becky and Jane. Lots of emotions in that clip, right? I want to acknowledge it can be a little bit heavy, but now I'm going to ask that you write an affirmation. You can address it directly to Becky, Jane, or both of them. And everybody's affirmation is going to be a little different. At the most basic level, it could be like, I heard a lot of fear about the way things are right now in the climate, right? But take a crack at it, send it in the chat, and once you're finished, look and see how other folks have written affirmations. These are fantastic affirmations. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that communication professionals are better on a first go than first year undergraduates. I'm just going to highlight a few of them that really stand out here. Kate says, I heard you feel disconnected and a deep sadness at the loss of meaningful connection with your family. Beautiful affirmation, like really kind of summing up the intent of what's being shared there. Sounds like you really value your family. It sounds like the desire to communicate is being stifled by fear. Sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed, afraid, and alienated, and thinking back about it makes you sad. And also how it reflects on the future for your family and the country. Yeah, these are all great. And I think do that essential purpose of establishing a shared sense of humanity, right? And that's really the goal of an affirmation. If you're still writing your affirmation, please feel free to continue finishing that and put it into the chat. But I'm going to move us on to our next clip. So for this clip, I'd really like us to listen for values. And this goes deeper than emotions. Values is one of the trickier things to listen for, but I've also found that it is one of the most useful for conversations across difference, especially when there's a lot of disagreement. And what this boils down to, we're going to put an explanation in the chat, but what were the speaker's intentions or purpose that shaped their actions or statements in the story? And what does this all imply about what's important to them? So that's what this really boils down to. What do we know is important to the person speaking based on what they shared? And we are going to hear from Carla in this next clip.
With COVID, when people first started getting sick and we were just trying to figure out what is going on, we were given a survey on a Tuesday to decide, okay, who wants to work here or who wants to work from home. Me and the lady who was sitting next to me, we both said, well, no, we don't want to work from home. We want to work in the building. So we filled out the survey, and then by Friday, the decision was made. They sent everybody home. I do not have a cell phone. I did not have internet, didn't have a computer.
Oh my goodness.
And so what they did was, because we have the computers at work, so they gave us the computers. And there were me and a couple of other people who were living out in the rural areas who did not have internet. I'm not in a rural area. I just didn't have internet because I did not have a computer at home and didn't need it. So I had to subscribe to an internet service. So I set up the computer in front of the window so I can be able to see people as they pass by. But my husband was living in Houston, Texas. And so he was going back and forth. And we don't have any children. So working here and just being here by myself all of the time, there were days that I did not leave the house. Yes, I go to the grocery store, but I had a routine. That routine was interrupted. I have a Girl Scout troop, and so we weren't meeting there because it was shut down. So our meetings were on Zoom, and with our worship service, that was on Zoom. That's good, but we didn't have that face to face, physical, I can touch you contact. That affected me.
All right. We just heard from Carla. I know for me, this definitely resonates in a lot of workplace conversations. So take a moment to write a sentence responding to Carla. And once again, I'd like us to focus on values. So what do we know is important to Carla based on what we just heard from her? Got some great responses coming in here. Sounds like you value stability and in-person connection with others, and that was made hard by COVID. Absolutely. Community is very important. Yeah, interactions with others and having her voice heard. Sounds like being physically connected with people is important to your well-being. Absolutely. I gotta say too, I love the moment where she talks about placing her desk in front of the window so that she can see folks walk by outside and see the nature. I would even say something along the lines of like, Carla, it sounds like you really value being able to physically see others and not be in the house, right? She talks a lot about especially not leaving the house. She values routine, those kinds of things. So folks are off to a great start here. So these affirmation skills have a couple like quick tips I want to share. One is that it's best to use these with people that you trust and who you feel pretty certain don't have any negative intentions, right? Because it does ask us to open up and empathize with someone. We want to do that with somebody who has our best intent at heart. So maybe not for a Facebook comment section, although you are free to give it a shot if you want. Secondly, a lot of my participants, my students, they talk about, oh, this can feel a little bit clunky to say something like, it sounds like. And I think that that is totally reasonable. I like to give an analogy that this is like going to the gym and doing a certain exercise. Like those exercises that you do in the gym might not be the way you're using your muscles in your day-to-day life, but they're really good at strengthening the muscle so that you can learn to use it in your own way out in the world. So please, practice this, exercise that muscle, and find a way to make it work for you. Find a way to make it your own. Third, we want to be authentic and genuine when we affirm someone. So, I've been in lots of situations throughout my life where maybe I share something in a group and somebody says, "Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Moving on." And I find that actually sometimes that can make it worse. We call that a pat affirmation. It's like kind of hollow and kind of meant to just like, it can feel dismissive. And so if you can't find yourself giving a genuine affirmation, sometimes no affirmation at all can be better. This skill is best used in more intimate settings like small groups or one-on-one. If we're in a large group setting and we're reflecting back to someone the emotions that they're feeling, that can feel really vulnerable, right? And so this is really a connection skill for smaller groups or one-to-one. And then lastly, I find myself at Thanksgiving dinner, maybe I don't actually want to say the affirmation, but even just thinking it in my head is building that muscle. So it doesn't have to look like 100% engaging, throwing everything at the wall. Even just thinking about it is important and helpful. So these micro practices, when we repeat them, reshape how we show up in difficult moments in conversations. And the goal is not to be perfect in every conversation. I don't even think that that exists, right? There is no right thing to say in a conversation like this. But the goal is to strengthen the muscle of listening and responding with empathy. Um, and with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Jonathan.
We have reached the end of today's session. So to close us out, we would love to hear from you one last time. What's one thing you're taking away from today's session? And please feel free to drop that in the chat. These are great. Listening to learn, not to respond or judge. Exactly. Kim says she wants more. That's great. We'll have a little bit of information for you in just a second. Yes, the idea of practicing being a key component of this. Absolutely. Brave is not comfortable. Absolutely. Wonderful. Okay, please keep throwing these in here. We'll have a second more, but if you'd like to learn more, if you'd like to collaborate, or if you'd like to bring OSS to your campus or organization, you can visit takeonesmallstep.org, or you can also reach out directly to myself or Cole. He's pasting our contact information into the chat now. Thank you all so much for your time, your energy, your participation. We hope this gave you some new tools and inspiration to bring deeper connection into your organization and communities. Thank you.